Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher and William Ury. From the introduction, I think for a 30-year edition of this book, this stood out. A quick survey of the news on almost any day reveals the compelling need for a better way to deal with differences. How many people, organizations, and nations are stubbornly bargaining over positions? How much destructive escalation results in bitter family feuds, endless lawsuits, and wars without end? For lack of a better process, how many opportunities are being lost to find solutions that are better for both sides? Conflict remains, as we have noted, a growth industry that is insane to think about, is it not? However, to get rid of conflict apparently shouldn't be the goal, because conflict is a totally inevitable part of life. The goal is to transform conflict, and the way we approach our differences from destructive behavior to side-by-side problem solving. And so, I got this book at least because of the importance of negotiation as a skill really kind of only going up in life. In fact, just think about it. In an age where people are more probably influenced by straight up information than ever before, no matter how true or false it is, isn't it important to use the information for the better good? And like, what's a better good than finding the best good for two initially opposing people facing the same problem, in need of different solutions? This book is also written by two guys in the Harvard Negotiation Project. What I talk about in this video is kind of just the summary and the surface, and obviously my thoughts on the whole thing. When it comes to negotiation, any method should be judged by three criteria. It should produce a wise agreement, if agreement is possible. It should be efficient, and it should improve, or at least not damage, the relationship between the parties. This involves many things, but all of them are very simply laid out in thorough examples throughout the book. One of them, of course, is not giving a sort of like binary option set, like,
okay, Jesse, you're either going to the fucking movie with me, or you're not going to the fucking movie with me.
The author calls this positional bargaining, and you shouldn't do it if you're trying to negotiate. It's just a big problem, and I agree. I think people are so quick to jump to this because we are all inherently just very selfish at our core, and you know, that is what it is. But if, let's say, we are all at our very best one day, we are all literally actually living our real, like, best lives, do you think that every day we would be looking to understand each other? Or do you think we'd just be stubbornly focused on ourselves and our own points of view when we're trying to negotiate with each other? So a huge problem is just when we, you know, don't do that. And separating the problem is the key to really going somewhere with it. Something else is focusing on the interests, like the fears and the desires of those negotiating, instead of, again, the positions, like the sides to it. Negotiations usually take the context of two things: substance or relationships. I mean, the relationship is more important than the outcome of just one particular negotiation, but the tricky thing is the relationship tends to get entangled with the problem. People and problems are not the same, and when they are, the author stresses it's important to separate them or disentangle them. And a huge part of this is understanding where they're coming from. I have tried to do this with people, and after listening to the book, I've realized that a huge reason for the times that it doesn't work is I keep forgetting I have to feel it. I really have to feel. The author says it's not just enough to study a beetle or something under a microscope. You have to know what it's like and feel what it's like to be a beetle. That sounds kind of weird. Sounds a little spiritual, but, you know, if you have to do it, then do it. The author talks about face saving, which I didn't really understand until now. It's reconciling an agreement with principle, not because, you know, I'm right and you're wrong, but because both of our opinions matter, and we are weighing out the values of those matters. Many negotiations are driven by a little but, you know, important set of core concerns. Those are talked about in the book. So are many ways of very effectively apologizing to people, which can help with negotiations when, you know, you yell at them and then you have to go or something. Or when you decide that you want to make a negotiation out of a problem that already was. And so are some of the problems with communications when listening, because it's not always easy to listen well. Negotiations are just easier when people together are facing the problem. And that's easier when people are not facing each other. And that obviously is easier to do when you get to know the person you're negotiating with before the negotiation itself. The better you know them, the better they know you, the more likely that you're going to get a better outcome of the negotiation, and faster. After a lot of this is inventing a little list of options, which is a huge asset of a skill if you're going to start negotiating. This involves things like identifying causes, not just the interests, the fears and desires, but also what ought to actually be done. Then the author talks about insisting on objective criteria. Like Ben Horowitz said in The Hard Thing About Hard Things, the key to an emotional discussion is to remove the emotion from the discussion. And there's also a whole section of, well, if I'm negotiating,
What if they won't cooperate?
What if they're more powerful?
Or what if they use
Dirty tricks.
to gain leverage.
What do I do?
There's a whole section about that. This is kind of an outlook on what the book explains. There's so many examples throughout the book. In case you hear this and you're like,
Sam, why should I get this book? I don't even get it.
I mean, if you were to jump what so many people would consider enormous hurdles in human life in history, like government and large corporation-sized efforts, history itself will show that negotiating is a very important skill to get good at. Before listening to the 1-hour conclusion of a 6-hour audiobook, I was wondering why the conclusion listed down was so long. But the conclusion, as it turns out, answers basically every question you might possibly have about different situations of negotiation that, a school wouldn't tell you about. All of these questions, if I had to guess, were probably asked by students and whatnot who read the book in the last 30 years, and they were like, well, what about this? I don't get this. I have a question. I don't know. I'm very confused. Quotes: the pyramids of power are shifting into networks of negotiation. I promised the public when I campaigned for this position that I would put an end to killer hairdryers and $10,000 bombs disguised as cars, and these regulations have done that. If they are not involved in the process, they are not likely to approve the product. How you see the world depends on where you sit. The people who want to manipulate you will attack your strengths, not your weaknesses. A statement about how you feel is difficult to challenge. There's probably nothing in this book that you don't already know at some level of your experience. Another way to change the game is to change the frame. Direction 1. I recommend this book for anyone who is at work in their field or talking to someone about work in their field and hears the word negotiate, negotiating, negotiation, or any form of it and goes, what? Direction 2. If you like this book, I recommend checking out Getting More by Stuart Diamond, which also seriously goes really deep in on negotiation. Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher and William Ury. There's a link to it in the description if you guys want to check it out and read the reviews. That and any other books I mentioned in this video if you want to check those out as well. If there are any books that you guys want me to check out and review, please let me know in the comments below. Also let me know if you checked out this book and you like it or you hate it or however you feel about it. But make sure to leave a like if you like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and if you could turn on that little bell to receive a notification every time I drop a new one, that would mean the world to me. Thank you guys so much for watching. You can find me everywhere, and I will see you then.